Welcome to Mythos AI, your source for Cliff's Notes on complex subjects. Join Anna and Phil for yet another engaging conversation.
So today we're diving into some pretty dense material. Um, a National Security Memorandum on AI and a framework for AI governance and risk management. These lay out how the Biden-Harris administration wants to approach using AI in national security.
And it's a tough needle to thread, right? Balancing all the possibilities of AI in things like national defense and cybersecurity with, making sure that this powerful technology is developed and used in a way that doesn't clash with our democratic values.
Yeah, it's interesting how AI is just becoming more and more a part of national security. It's not some futuristic thing anymore. It's very much here and now.
Absolutely. I mean, just look at what AI is already doing in intelligence analysis, cybersecurity. Even in areas like public safety, you're seeing AI make a real difference. And the U.S. is really trying to be a leader, not just in developing the technology itself, but also, in setting those standards for how it should be used responsibly.
And that's where this framework for AI governance and risk management comes in, right? It's like laying the groundwork, the rules of the road for using AI in national security. And it's built around these four key pillars, each one tackling a really critical aspect of making sure AI is used ethically and responsibly.
Okay, so let's break down these pillars. The first one is all about defining and limiting AI use, essentially setting boundaries for what AI can and can't be used for in national security.
So even in a world of, national security and intelligence gathering, there are still some lines that AI just shouldn't cross.
Exactly. And the framework is very clear about what those lines are. It outlines what are called prohibited use cases, situations where using AI would be just unacceptable.
Like what? What would be a prohibited use case?
Well, for instance, using AI for profiling individuals based on, let's say, their race or religion without really strict oversight, that's a no-go. I mean, these are situations where AI could be used to violate fundamental rights, and, that goes against those democratic values we were talking about.
Right, that makes sense. But I imagine there are also situations where using AI isn't completely off limits, but it does require extra caution because of the potential impact, right?
Exactly. The framework calls these high-impact use cases. These are situations where AI could have, big consequences for things like public safety or democratic participation,
Hmm.
really sensitive areas where you need to tread carefully.
Can you give me some concrete examples of these high-impact use cases?
Sure. Um, Imagine using AI for predictive policing. The idea sounds good, right? It could
Hmm.
be really helpful in preventing crime. But if the data that the AI is using to make those predictions is biased, it could unfairly target certain communities.
Right, that's a real concern.
Or think about using AI to analyze social media to try and identify potential threats. I mean, it could be effective, but it also raises some serious questions about privacy. Are you essentially spying on people based on their opinions or who they associate with?
So it's a delicate balance, trying to harness the power of AI without, going too far.
Exactly. And that's why for these high impact use cases, the framework requires extra scrutiny. You need to carefully evaluate those risks, monitor the AI systems constantly, and be transparent about how you're using them. It's about recognizing that in these situations, the stakes are just much higher.
Okay, so the first pillar is all about making sure AI is used responsibly and ethically. It's about setting boundaries and making sure the AI doesn't become a tool for, eroding the very values it's meant to protect. Now, the second pillar shifts gears to risk management.
Yeah, this is where the rubber meets the road. It's about putting practical safeguards in place to minimize the potential risks of using AI in national security. Anticipating problems and trying to head them off before they blow up.
So the proactive approach, like trying to identify and mitigate those risks before they turn into real issues.
Exactly. And there are a few key pieces to this. One is conducting these really thorough risk and impact assessments before deploying any AI system.
Who does that involve?
Well, it's about thinking through every possible scenario. What could go wrong with this system? How likely is it to happen? And if it does, what would be the consequences? It's kind of like a risk-benefit analysis, but it's much more detailed and specific to that particular AI system.
Makes sense. But even with all the planning in the world, things can still go wrong. Are there other safeguards built into the framework to address that?
Absolutely. The framework is very clear that human judgment should always be a part of the process, especially when it comes to AI systems that are, making decisions with potential consequences for people's lives. There always needs to be a human in the loop, able to, step in and override the AI if necessary.
So even as AI gets more sophisticated, there's still a need for a human check to make sure things don't go off the rails.
Absolutely. And the framework goes even further when it comes to AI systems that could directly impact federal employees.
Like what? Give me an example of that.
Like using AI in hiring decisions or to assess the health and fitness of government workers.
Mm.
I mean, these are areas where you really need to be careful about potential bias and fairness.
Yeah, I can see how those would be particularly sensitive areas.
And so the framework specifically calls for um, additional procedural safeguards in these cases, things like multiple levels of review for any AI-generated recommendations and really clear processes for appeals if someone feels like they've been treated unfairly.
So this second pillar is all about building a culture of responsible AI use. It's about acknowledging that there are risks and making sure those risks are mitigated at every step of the way.
Yes, it's not just about the technology itself, it's about how that technology is used and the systems in place to make sure it's used ethically and responsibly.
Okay, so we've covered the first two pillars. Let's move on to the third one, which focuses on monitoring AI use.
Transparency and accountability, those are the watchwords here. This pillar requires federal agencies to keep track of every AI system they're using, especially those high-impact use cases we talked about earlier. It's like creating a centralized inventory of how AI is being used across the government.
And why is that so important? What's the purpose of having this kind of detailed catalog?
Well, a few things. First, it promotes transparency. It lets people see what AI systems are being used and what they're being used for. And that's important for building trust.
So it's about knowing where and how AI is being deployed, especially in these sensitive areas of national security.
Exactly. Second, it allows for continuous auditing. You can regularly check to make sure that the use of AI is in line with principles laid out in the framework. It's a way to make sure the rules are being followed.
And I guess it also helps you avoid unnecessary duplication. Right. If you know what AI systems are already out there, you can make sure the agencies aren't wasting resources developing something that already exists.
Precisely. It's about responsible use and efficient use. It's a way to get the most out of these AI systems while making sure they're being used properly.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
All right, on to the final pillar of the framework, which is all about training and accountability.
This is where the human element really comes in. It's about making sure that federal employees understand how to work with AI effectively and responsibly.
So it's about training people to use these systems properly.
More than that, it's about recognizing that AI is a tool, and like any tool, it has its limitations. You need to know how to use it, but you also need to know when not to use it.
So training is about giving people a realistic understanding of what AI can and can't do.
Exactly. And it's also about helping people recognize potential problems. Like, if an AI system is producing biased results, you need to be able to spot that and question it.
So it's about empowering people to be more critical users of AI, not just blindly accepting whatever the machine spits out.
Right. And that kind of training is really crucial for building trust in AI. If people understand how the technology works and where its limitations lie, they're more likely to use it effectively and responsibly.
And alongside training, this pillar also talks about accountability. What does that look like in practice?
Well, it means establishing clear lines of responsibility for these AI systems. If something goes wrong, it should be clear who's accountable. It also means developing procedures for investigating any potential misuse of AI. And of course, it means having consequences if the rules are broken.
So there's a comprehensive approach, making sure that there's oversight, that there's accountability, and that people are held responsible for how these powerful tools are being used.
Exactly. It's about creating a system where AI is used responsibly and ethically, and where there are checks and balances in place to prevent abuse.
Okay, so we've walked through all four pillars of the framework, which really sets the stage for how the U.S. government wants to approach AI and national security. But now let's turn to the National Security Memorandum itself. How does this document build on those principles outlined in the framework?
The NSM takes those broad principles and translates them into concrete actions. It's about turning those aspirations into, real-world policies and directives. It lays out very specific steps for how the government should be developing, deploying, and governing AI in the context of national security.
So it's the operational manual, so to speak. It tells agencies, okay, here's how you actually do this.
Yeah, exactly. It's not just a set of goals, it's a roadmap for how to achieve those goals. And one of the key elements of that roadmap is the creation of this new entity called the AI Safety Institute.
The AI Safety Institute. Tell me more about that, what's its purpose?
Well, the idea is to create a central hub, a place where everyone involved in AI and national security can come together and collaborate. You've got the people who are developing the technology, the national security agencies who are going to be using it, and the policymakers who are setting the rules. And the AI Safety Institute is meant to bring all of those people together to foster cooperation and make sure that everyone is on the same page when it comes to, developing and using AI safely and responsibly.
It sounds like a crucial initiative, especially given, the potential risks we've been talking about. It's like a safety net, making sure that this incredibly powerful technology is being handled with the care and consideration it deserves.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that AI has the potential to be incredibly beneficial, but it also has the potential to cause a lot of harm if it's not used wisely. And the AI Safety Institute is there to help mitigate those risks and make sure that AI is ultimately used for good.
We were just digging into the role of the AI Safety Institute and how it's trying to bring everyone together to work on this issue of AI and national security. It seemed like a really important step in the right direction, especially given how much AI is being used in all these different aspects of national security these days.
Absolutely. And the National Security Memorandum, or NSM for short, goes beyond just setting up this new institute. It also really emphasizes the need to, protect U.S. leadership in AI. It's basically saying we need to make sure that foreign adversaries don't get their hands on sensitive AI technologies.
It sounds almost like, I don't know, a new kind of arms race where AI is the weapon.
In a way, it is, and that's why the NSM is directing intelligence agencies to really prioritize counterintelligence efforts that focus on AI specifically. It's about, identifying and stopping any attempts to steal U.S. AI technology or to disrupt its development.
I mean, it makes sense when you think about it. AI has the potential to really shift the balance of power, so it's not surprising that the U.S. wants to, maintain its edge in this area.
Exactly, and the NSM actually connects this effort to the CAPS Act, which might seem a little unrelated at first.
The CHPS Act. Remind me what that was all about again.
Right, so the CHPS Act, which stands for Creating Helpful Incentives to Produce Semiconductors, was passed back in 2022. It's basically designed to encourage companies to manufacture semiconductors here in the U.S. Those tiny little chips that power all of our electronics these days.
Right, I remember now. But how does that tie into national security and AI?
Well, the connection is that a lot of the most advanced chips that are needed for AI development, they're not actually made in the U.S. We're really reliant on foreign manufacturers for those. And the NSM is saying that, that could be a big problem if those supply chains get disrupted, especially during conflict. Imagine if we couldn't get the chips we need to power our AI systems.
So it's not just about boosting American manufacturing. It's about making sure that we have a secure and reliable supply of these essential components that are needed for AI. And ultimately, that's a national security issue.
Precisely. It's about controlling the foundational building blocks of this really important technology. So we're not at the mercy of other countries when it comes to AI.
Okay, so the NSM is talking about protecting U.S. interests and leadership in AI. But it also lays out some guidelines for how AI should actually be used in national security operations, right? What are some of the key points there?
Yeah, one of the big things is this emphasis on taking a data-driven approach to AI. It's about, not just throwing AI at every problem, but really carefully assessing whether it's the right tool for the job. And a big part of that is building what they're calling an evaluation infrastructure.
What is that, an evaluation infrastructure?
It's basically a system for evaluating the risks and benefits of using AI in different scenarios. Before you actually deploy any AI system, you need to really carefully think about what could go wrong, what are the potential downsides, and are those risks worth taking given the potential benefit.
So it's about making informed decisions about when and how to use AI, right? Not just assuming that it's always the best solution.
Exactly. And this evaluation infrastructure would look at a lot of different factors. How accurate is the AI system? Is there any potential for bias in the data it's using? Could there be unintended consequences that we haven't thought of? It's a pretty thorough process designed to make sure that AI is used responsibly and effectively.
Makes sense. Anything else stand out in the NSM's guidelines for using AI?
Yeah, they also talk about streamlining the procurement process specifically for AI technologies. And the reason for that is they want to make it easier for the government to work with what they call non-traditional AI vendors.
Non-traditional vendors, what do they mean by that?
Well, traditionally, the government has relied on these big, established defense contractors for a lot of its technology needs. But in the world of AI, a lot of the most innovative companies are actually these smaller startups, maybe even spin-offs from universities.
So the government is trying to be a little bit more nimble and open to working with these newer, more agile companies that are on the cutting edge of AI.
Exactly, because if they only stick with those traditional players, they might miss out on some of the best and most innovative solutions that are out there.
Makes sense. So we've talked a lot about how the U.S. is approaching this, but AI is a global issue, right? Does the NSM address that at all, the international aspects of AI governance?
It does. The administration recognizes that the U.S. can't go it alone on this. They actually stress the importance of working with allies to develop, shared standards and norms for AI development and use.
So are there any specific initiatives or collaborations happening in that area?
There are a few. The U.S. is involved in something called the International Code of Conduct for AI, which is bringing together countries to, sort of hammer out some common principles for ethical AI development. It's about making sure that everyone is on the same page when it comes to responsible AI use.
So it's like trying to find a common language for AI governance, recognizing that this is a global issue that's going to affect everyone.
Exactly. And the U.S. is also working through existing organizations like the G7 and the United Nations to promote more dialogue and cooperation on AI governance. They want to avoid a situation where every country is just doing its own thing, which could lead to a lot of confusion and mistrust.
It seems like the alternative is, like an AI arms race, where everyone is just trying to outdo each other without really thinking about the bigger picture.
Right, and that's not a future that anyone wants. International cooperation is crucial, not just for promoting responsible use of AI, but also for ensuring that the benefits of AI are shared widely and that the risks are mitigated collectively.
Now, shifting gears a bit, there's been a lot of talk about making sure that the development of AI is more inclusive, that it's not just dominated by a few big companies. Does the NSM address that at all?
Yes, absolutely. The administration has been very vocal about wanting to see a more diverse and inclusive AI ecosystem. They don't want to see all the power and resources concentrated in the hands of just a few large corporations.
I can see why that's a concern. Too much concentration in any industry can stifle innovation and, lead to a very narrow range of perspectives.
Exactly. And the NSM specifically highlights a program called the National AI Research Resource, which is designed to, kind of level the playing field in AI research.
Okay, what is that exactly? How does it work?
It's basically a program that's going to provide universities, small businesses, and nonprofit organizations with access to the resources they need to conduct AI research. And I'm talking about resources that are usually only available to those big tech companies, like, really powerful computing infrastructure, huge data sets for training AI models, access to top experts, that sort of thing.
So it's about democratizing AI research, giving more people a chance to participate and contribute, and hopefully leading to, more creative and innovative solutions.
Precisely. And it's also a way to make sure that the benefits of AI are shared more broadly, that they don't just accrue to a small handful of powerful entities.
We've covered a lot of ground here. We talked about the framework for ethical AI use. We dove into the National Security Memorandum and all of its specifics. It's a pretty comprehensive strategy, right?
Yeah.
It's touching on everything from research and development to international cooperation and the actual nuts and bolts of how AI is used in national security operations.
It really is. I think it shows that the U.S. government is taking this issue seriously. They understand that AI is a game changer, and they're trying to get out ahead of the curve by setting clear guidelines for its development and use.
So we've spent a lot of time kind of dissecting the Biden-Harris administration's approach to AI and national security. We talked about that framework for ethical AI use, and then we went through all the specifics of that National Security Memorandum. But I guess the big question now is, what does it all mean? Where does this all fit into the bigger picture?
Right. We've looked at the specifics, the rules, and the guidelines. But now we have to step back and ask, what are the implications of all of this? How is AI going to change the world, especially when it comes to things like, national security and global affairs?
It almost feels like we're trying to predict the future, which is, impossible. AI is moving so fast, it's hard to know what the long-term consequences are going to be.
Yeah, it's a moving target for sure. But I think we can at least try to anticipate some of the challenges, based on what we're seeing now. And one of the things that I think is a real concern is the potential for AI to kind of worsen existing inequalities between countries.
How so?
Well, think about it. The countries that have the most resources, the most advanced technology, they're going to be the ones who benefit the most from AI, right? And that could create a bigger gap between the haves and the have-nots, which could have, pretty serious implications for national security.
Okay, I see where you're going with this. So basically, you're saying that AI could create this like two-tiered world.
Exactly. You could have a handful of countries with these, super advanced AI capabilities that give them a huge advantage, both militarily and economically. And those countries could use that advantage to, I don't know, exert more control over other countries, maybe even undermine their sovereignty in some ways.
It sounds a bit like a dystopian sci-fi movie.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a guaranteed outcome, but it's definitely a possibility that we need to be thinking about. And that's why, that focus on international collaboration that we talked about earlier, that's so important. If we can get countries working together, agreeing on some basic rules and principles for AI development, then maybe we can avoid that kind of future.
So it's about preventing an AI arms race, where everyone is just trying to one-up each other without thinking about the consequences.
Right, exactly. It's about recognizing that we're all in this together and that the responsible development of AI is, a shared responsibility.
Okay, so we've got the nation-state level, but then you also have to think about non-state actors, right?
hmm
Like terrorist groups or criminal organizations. How does AI change the game for them?
It's a whole new set of challenges. AI could make it much easier for those groups to, I don't know, carry out really sophisticated cyber attacks, disrupting critical infrastructure, stealing sensitive information, things like that. They could also use AI to spread disinformation and propaganda more effectively, manipulate public opinion. So, chaos and distrust.
It's kind of scary to think about the ways that AI could be used for malicious purposes, and it's not like those groups are going to be following any ethical guidelines, right?
Exactly. So that's another area where international cooperation is going to be really important. We need to be sharing information, working together to develop countermeasures, and maybe even thinking about some kind of global regulations for access to certain types of AI technology, the kind of stuff that could be really dangerous in the wrong hands.
Yeah, it seems like trying to regulate something like AI on a global scale would be incredibly difficult. But I guess the alternative is even worse, right?
It's a tough challenge, but it's one that we have to address because the potential consequences of inaction are just too great.
Okay, shifting gears again, I want to talk about the impact of AI on warfare itself. I mean, we're already seeing AI being used in things like drone warfare and cyber attacks, and it seems like that trend is only going to accelerate.
Oh, absolutely. And one of the biggest concerns there is the development of autonomous weapons systems, weapons that can basically make decisions about using lethal force without any human intervention.
It's like something out of a science fiction movie, killer robots running around making their own decisions.
It's not science fiction anymore. It's a very real possibility, and it raises some really serious ethical and legal questions that we need to grapple with. Like, who is responsible when an autonomous weapon system makes a mistake and harms civilians? How do we ensure meaningful human control over these systems?
Yeah, those are tough questions. And it's not just about warfare, right? AI has the potential to transform our societies in all sorts of ways, both good and bad. We've already talked about the potential for AI to exacerbate inequality, but there's also the impact on the economy and the future of work.
Right. I mean, AI is already automating a lot of jobs, and that trend is only going to continue. So we need to be thinking about how to prepare our workforces for this new reality, how to make sure that people have the skills they need to thrive in an AI-driven economy.
And what about the implications for privacy and civil liberties? AI can analyze huge amounts of data, everything from our online activity to our movements in the physical world. So how do we protect individual rights in a world where AI is constantly watching?
It's a huge challenge. We need to be thinking about things like transparency, accountability, and fairness. How do we make sure that AI systems aren't biased against certain groups of people? How do we ensure that individuals have some control over how their data is used?
It seems like we're at a crossroads with AI. It has this incredible potential to do good, to solve problems, to make our lives better. But it also has this dark side, this potential to be used for harmful purposes, to erode our privacy, to exacerbate inequality.
That's exactly right. And that's where the conversations we're having right now are so important. We need to be thinking about these issues, debating them, and trying to come up with solutions together.
So what do you think needs to happen next? Where do we go from here?
Well, I think it's about continuing this dialogue, making sure that these issues stay at the forefront of public debate, And it can't just be a national conversation. It has to be global. We need governments, industry leaders, researchers, ethicists, everyone working together to figure out how to navigate this new world, this AI-powered future that we're all heading towards.
Well said. It's clear that AI isn't just some abstract technological issue. It's something that's going to touch every aspect of our lives, from the economy to national security to the very fabric of our societies. And the choices that we make today are going to determine what kind of future we end up with.
I completely agree. We have a responsibility to get this right, to make sure that AI is used for good, that it benefits all of humanity, and that it doesn't lead us down a path of, conflict and division.
Well, thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive into the complex world of AI and national security. It's been an enlightening conversation, and we hope it's encouraged you to continue exploring these issues because, like we said, the future is in our hands.
Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for listening to Mythos AI. Stay tuned for more concise insights. And remember to hit the like button and subscribe for future episodes.